One of the big questions looming over Washington in the new year, can Speaker Mike Johnson keep his gavel? We should know more on Friday. That is when the new Congress is sworn in and begins the voting process for Speaker of the House. President-elect Trump has endorsed Johnson, but with a razor-thin majority in the new House, Republicans cannot afford much opposition. NewsNation's Joe Connell is following all of this live for us there in Washington. Joe, even with Trump's endorsement, this could still be a very close vote.
Yeah, and we'll explain why. It's pretty simple, actually. It's that Speaker Johnson has a math problem. Whoever wants to become Speaker of the House is going to need 218 votes. That is their magic number, assuming that everybody in Congress shows up on Friday for this House vote. 218. How many Republicans are there going to be? 219. So razor thin might even be understating what he's got going on. He can only afford to lose one vote, and then he's in trouble. And already we know that at least one Republican has said on the record that he's not voting for Mike Johnson. And that Republican is Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky. In fact, he actually doubled down yesterday in a pretty harsh way. This is the message that he put out yesterday saying, quote, "For months, Democrats ignored the fact that Joe Biden was a potato. They convinced themselves keeping him around was the pragmatic way to win the day. Too late did they admit that the emperor had no clothes. Republicans are doing the same thing by keeping Speaker Mike Johnson." So harsh words there from Massie, and it seems like he's pretty firmly entrenched in his position. Democratic leaders, they have suggested that they're not going to provide any votes for Mike Johnson like they did the last time. You may remember a couple of months ago, Republicans tried to oust Speaker Johnson. It was Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Democrats came to his rescue with some votes. That is not going to be the case this time. And when we talk about how Massie's on the record, there are several other Republicans who've said things like they're not committal at this point. They're not saying that they're going to vote for or against Johnson just yet. Several have pointed to problems that they say they have with him, especially when it came to the spending bill that just passed a couple of days ago. They felt like there was too much money in there that wasn't paid for. Those that are worried about the deficit and the debt, they have some beef with Mike Johnson. It's not a large number, but it's a number that is enough where his speakership could be in trouble, at least for the first few votes. I want to just put up one more quote that we got from a senior House Republican, not a member, but a senior staff member, told us here on Background that the worst thing, he says, that Johnson could do, biggest mistake, is to start giving as many concessions and paying as many bribes as Kevin McCarthy did. You may remember when Kevin McCarthy was in a very similar situation, Nichole, he made a lot of promises to certain members of Congress so that they would vote for him to be Speaker. Many of those members said a couple months later he didn't follow through on those promises. There were a lot of people upset. Ultimately, McCarthy lost his gavel. So that is something that some Republicans are cautioning Johnson not to move forward in that direction.
All right, so we're seeing this turmoil again around the speakership. Yeah. So who else could we see as Speaker if not Johnson?
Right, so it's a good point. Republicans need an alternative if they're not going to support Mike Johnson. A couple of names that we've heard would be people like Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan's got a lot of respect from Donald Trump, and also he's gained respect from more moderate members of Congress. You look at some other people in leadership as well, people like Steve Scalise, for example, people like Tom Emmer. These are people who have a lot of admiration among Republicans in the House Republican Conference. They sort of know how the leadership game works. So aside from those, you might expect someone to throw out a sort of wild card name. Byron Donalds is somebody who last time got a couple of votes last year and was even considered for Donald Trump's cabinet. You could certainly see people rally around someone like that. It is Speaker Johnson's race to lose, however. So let's see what happens on Friday. He's got some work to do between now and then. We've been told he's already doing that work.
All right. Joe Connell live for us there in Washington. Joe, thank you. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.